going to start a new series called Legacy. Today I'm going to talk about money, but just because money is a piece of our legacy. We're all called to leave a legacy, and we're all called to make an impact. And part of that is money. I wasn't really planning on this. I was just going to talk about money, but actually Saturday I felt like from God as I was preparing / scrambling, just kidding, preparing, I felt like there's way more facets to my legacy than my money. I do want to talk about money, but so I think we're going to do 2-3 weeks on money, 2-3 weeks on marriage, and 2 or 3 weeks on parenting, because those really are our legacy. And I know some people don't like talking about money in church. I never understood why the preacher didn't like talking about money. And now I'm the pastor, and I kind of get it. Because it's so easy for you to assume that it's motivated by, my paycheck is kind of influenced by you being generous, right? But we're not going to talk much about giving today, actually. I just want to talk about legacy and impact. And we have people in the room who are carrying a legacy and who are leaving a legacy. Not that they're leaving anytime soon, but they have something for us to learn from. And so each week, I want to invite some folks up here to just share some stories of generosity and giving where they stepped out in faith and God was faithful to them. And so I asked Connie if she would come and share a story of God's faithfulness and generosity and all of that. And because I think there's something we need to get a hold of. The Greek word for testimony is, you can come up. I'm just killing time while you come. It actually is, in that word is the word that means do it again. And so we hear a testimony, and something in my heart says, oh man, if God did that for Connie, he could do it for me. He could do it again. And so that's why I want to hear stories from people, because I think it might stir some faith in our hearts. So this is Connie.
You get the amplified version with me, so Ron's not speaking. The thing I'm going to share this morning came from a session just like this. We were in First Assembly. We were in our 20s. Our kids were 8 and 4. And they did a session on giving. The pastor's job is to equip the saints, and giving is a part of what we saints do. Yeah. So we were being equipped, and they asked Ron to speak. We had been in the church very long, and they had materials, and all he had to do was read the material and then share. And because we didn't have our handle on finances by any means, so the two things that Ron and I got out of that session was, you're blessed to be a blessing. And the second was to live below your means. And so we set up our lives on those many principles, but those two principles. And after the session was over, they gave you opportunities to put what you had heard and learned into practice. So they gave us an opportunity to, through a program that Assemblies has, adopt a child. And so we took our 2 girls, 8 and 4, and they chose who we would support, living beyond our means, beyond our family, supporting somebody that had a need. That's why I miss taking an offering, because your kids need to see you worship. They need to see you give.
Yeah.
So we don't do that here, but that's okay. And so that's how we trained our girls. We just were doing it then because it was an opportunity. We didn't realize what God was doing in our lives and in our girls' lives. They have grown up. They've been on numerous mission trips. They have taken their families on mission trips. Our oldest daughter works with the Children's Home Society. She has helped with many, many, many adoptions, which makes her heart sore. So we were just being obedient then for the opportunity that was provided, but we didn't realize what God was going to do through our children, giving to that little girl monthly. And we've been giving ever since. We have Marjorie hanging on our fridge right now. And how many years that been? Our girls are 54 and 51. And we've been carrying that out our whole lives. And now we have a granddaughter and son-in-law that live generously, and their home is an open door. They've had people living with them, and my great-grandsons are growing up in the environment of hospitality and generosity, and all we did was respond to a teaching. So don't click off because this is a service or a session on giving. It impacted our marriage. We set up our budget with a line of giving. You notice that isn't our tithe. That's beyond our tithe. We have a line of giving. So when the Lord nudges us, we're ready. And he will nudge if he knows your heart's ready. And he will supply. And you can be used in that way. So that's our little encouragement to you. Live a life of generosity and don't turn off. Nathan's trying to equip you to be a servant in the new.
Thank you, Connie. That's so good. That's legacy. I didn't even tell her that this was about legacy. I just said, would you share a testimony of giving? And man, that just fits perfectly. Even the little picture kind of fits with the feet following in footsteps. So you were made to have a legacy. Legacy is God's idea. God invented family. God invented kingdoms and nations. He invented legacy. And everyone is called to leave a legacy. And we can go to the Old Testament. It's really easy to see that, right? Where God calls Abraham, and then he extends the call on Abraham's life. Isn't it interesting that God called Abraham and said, out of Abraham, I'm going to make a great nation. And it wasn't until his grandson, who was named Israel, that it began to take fruit. The legacy had to be carried for a couple of generations before it even took fruit. Abraham had to steward something that he wasn't even going to see. And I just think some of us, maybe we're just happy to be saved and go to heaven someday. And if we could pay the bills and survive, that's awesome. But God's called you to leave a lasting impact. And one of the ways that he wants to use you is in the way of finance. But God called you, chose you, saved you. He didn't just save you from something. He saved you into something. Jesus said this in John 15. He said, you didn't choose me, I chose you. Why did he choose you? I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit. I would say lasting fruit is legacy. Fruit that lasts beyond my life. That's a legacy. You're called to bear lasting fruit. You're called to make an impact. You're called to have a legacy. I forgot it. I was going to bring, when my grandma died, I got her her Bible dictionary. Really old, worn out resource. I got to tell you, I haven't yet used it in study, and I probably never will use it in study. The information inside of it is fine, but I can now find that on my computer much, much easier. So actually, as a book, very little value. But I open those pages, and I see her notes. This is a woman who was saved at 19 or 20, read the Bible through cover to cover every year from the time she got saved. She died in her 90s. She read the Bible more than 60, 70 times. A woman of the Word. And so I opened that book and I said, this is my legacy. I can remember a story. I can remember this happening. It's not a story to me. I was there. It was me. Even though it was told to me over and over again, I actually remember it. My mom and I are driving in the car, and I think I'm in the middle. Back in those days, the kids got to sit in the middle in the front. Can you believe that? Just dashboard right there. I'm sitting next to my mom, and I said to her, Mama, Dad's a man of God. And she said, yes, he is. And I paused, and my little brain is thinking, and I said, I'm going to be a man of God too someday. That's legacy. That's legacy. I didn't do this myself. I don't even know what this is. But I'm standing on the shoulders of generations before me. And I'm sorry if this doesn't pump you up. Check your pulse. This is what you exist for. The minute, if you're a parent, the minute you have that child in your arms, you say, my life is not about me anymore. I want to leave a legacy. That story always made me laugh about me, and I want to be a man of God someday. And then I became a father. I said, oh, God, help me. I want my kids to say my dad is a man of God, and I'm going to be just like him. I want to carry a legacy. But here's the thing, a legacy isn't optional. You are going to leave a legacy. You will leave a legacy. You will leave something behind. In the terms of finance, how many people leave behind debt and financial problems and all of that to their kids to sort out? It happens all the time. And then we see the other side where people leave an inheritance onto their children, a business onto their children, legacy. You will leave a legacy. Deuteronomy tells us this. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I call heaven and earth as witness today against you, that I've set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. So the implication here is if I choose life, it affects my descendants. Obviously, if I choose death, it affects my descendants. Legacy. God was saying to his children here after they were delivered out of Egypt, okay, I'm now making you into a nation. Today's a great moment for you to stop and say, what will our legacy be? Will we be a people who choose life? Or will we be a people who choose death? And isn't it interesting that God didn't try to motivate them by just their own life? Choose life, you'll have a great life. He said, choose life, think about your descendants. Think about your legacy. It matters. How we handle resources, money, time, talent, treasure, is a crucial part of our legacy. Jesus makes the connection between your heart and your wallet. He says, where your treasure is, your heart is. Money matters. I think Jesus talked about money almost more than anything. Right up there with hell, actually. Two things we don't want to talk about. Money and hell. And Jesus talked about them all the time. But there's a connection between your heart and your wallet. And some of us get uncomfortable when we talk about blessing because somewhere we've made it spiritual to be poor. Like it's wicked to be wealthy. I just have one simple question to blow that whole narrative up. How rich is God? Is he evil? Wealth is not evil. Money is not evil. The love of money is evil. And I find, for me, what I tend to see in Christians that embrace a poverty gospel, I don't like the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel says, you know how you know you're a man of faith? If you have a lot of money. Both of them are idolizing money. Money says I'm holy. Here, the lack of money says I'm holy. Both of them are wrong. But what I've noticed is people who live in the poverty gospel have no vision for global impact. It's just, I'm just happy, me and Jesus. Give me my bread and my fish, and I'll be happy. No legacy, no impact. I think it's wrong to pursue wealth for the sake of wealth. But once you get a hold of legacy, once you get a hold of vision, and you say, God, this vision is going to require resource. Now we're clicking. I want to have an impact. And God, it's going to take resources to do that. So teach me how to be a good steward of your money. How we handle resources is a crucial part of our legacy because our heart's connected to our wallet, and nothing derails a life like financial problems. We're seeing it in the church all over. If you hear of a pastor stepping down, unfortunately, it's probably one of two things. The secretary was too good looking, or he couldn't keep his hands out of the offering. Money blows churches up. Money blows marriages up. Almost half of marriages in America end because of financial stuff. This matters. And we're a church, we love, like, I love to preach, spiritual stuff and really, like prophetic things and the gospel and these practical things. I tend to like get bored, like, oh man, I want to preach the heavy stuff. But what I'm realizing is, and maybe you're here and you can relate to this, when you're wondering if your house is going to get foreclosed on, you don't want to hear about the theological significance of the Lord's Prayer. You want to know, God, help! I got to pay the bills. And sometimes I think we can get so spiritual that we got people right in front of us that need help in these practical ways. So hopefully today inspires you, not only for your own legacy, but hey, there's people in the room who need your voice in their life. And I'm going to try really hard to connect mothers and fathers to spiritual children today. We got to come out of here with a plan and a vision for our future. Learning to handle money with integrity is crucial for kingdom impact. Lasting kingdom impact is almost always going to involve some sort of financial investment. It just is. It just is. And I actually think God works it that way because he wants to keep his people dependent on him. Keep laying that thing down that we love so much, our money. Keep laying it down. Keep trusting him. But what God does almost always is going to require our some sort of financial investment on our part. So as a church, we're believing God for a building. I think God has shown us the building, and we're it's going to take a miracle. But it's going to require some money. Now, you might say, hey, let's just pray that they'll give it to us. Yeah, I'll join you in that prayer, but I actually think the journey of us getting our house in order, getting out of debt, faithfully, I mean faith, like faith-filled giving towards the vision is going to do something in our heart that somebody gifting us a building wouldn't do. I actually feel like God wants to take us on this journey, and it needs to cost us something. Hopefully, the vision of us having our own house inspires us, that legacy, a building that would last beyond us, would inspire us to finally do some things that we've needed to do, that we've all kind of known I need to, live within my means. I need to get rid of some debt. I need to make some sacrifices. I think God wants to use things like that to create dependence and bring us into godly order. God could absolutely give it to us. The story of the Israelites being delivered out of Egypt sort of reminds me of this process here. When they're in the wilderness, I think it's interesting how God's miracles work when they're in the wilderness. They go to bed, they wake up in the morning, manna on the ground, food on the ground for them. They did nothing. They went to sleep, God fed them, breakfast in bed. Then they start complaining that all they have is this bread stuff, and so God feeds them quail. And all of God's miracles were 100% God initiated. In fact, they were whining, and he just did this for them out of his mercy. He does these miracles. But the minute they shift from survival mode to legacy mode, crossing over, now this is the land that God's given us, the miracles shifted. Now God's miracles are in response to their obedience. March around that city 7 times, then I'll knock the walls down. You give, you get your house in order, and see what I'll do with your gift. And I just feel in my heart that's where we are as a people. That God's inviting us into a life of order, kingdom order, and obedience, and he wants to match our obedience with his miracle. But if we sit back waiting for manna, I don't think this is that kind of a season. See, God's a good investor. He owns it all, and he's a really good investor, and we want to be the people he trusts with his resources. If they're his resources, then we have an obligation to handle them his way. We have somebody who handles my retirement and all of our investments, and I could call that person up and say, hey, I want to take all that money and I want to dump it in this stock. And he could say, man, that's a really bad idea. And I'd say, yeah, I know, but I just got a feeling. I want to put it there. I would not do that. Yeah, but it's my money. I want to put it there. Well, I just think that's really, okay, great, but I want to put it there. It's my money. I get to invest it how I want. God owns it all. He gets to decide how he wants to invest his money. And I want to be the person who just humbly obeys and says, okay, Lord, it's your money. You want to put it there? It's yours. I'll invest your money where you want it invested. We're just a steward. Here's the thing. God's ways of handling his money actually work. It's like God knows stuff. And he set things up. And if you do things God's way, it's not a formula that, oh, I'll be wealthy if I do things God's way. But there are principles that work, period. And the financial principles work whether you're a Christian or not. Actually, there are articles that have been written about unbelieving business people have come to realize that for some reason, generosity positively impacts their company and their bottom line. That's a godly principle. It works whether the Bible says it rains on the just and the unjust. There's principles that work. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. That doesn't mean every single Christian parent who does everything right, their kid will not walk away. It's saying, as a principle, when you raise a kid in a godly home, in a godly way, as a principle, they're much, much, much more likely not to depart from it. I can guarantee you that if you don't follow God's principles, you will not be blessed financially. I can't guarantee you that you do God's way, you'll be a millionaire, but I can tell you that you definitely increase the opportunity to be blessed by God by positioning yourself that way as a good steward, right? And again, this isn't about getting a new car and a swimming pool. This is about legacy. This is about being a conduit. We need to see, I went to a breakout session at a conference with a pastor talking about finance. He says, in most financial meetings, we break the money into a pie. And we say this percent goes here, and this percent goes here, and this percent goes here, and this percent goes here. But in the kingdom, we don't see resources as a pie. We see it as a river. And we're dependent on God for that river to keep flowing. And we just direct the river wherever God wants it to go. It's his money. It's meant to flow through us. Not to us, not just to us. So here's what happens. People begin to learn about God's principles, God's ways of handling money, and wouldn't you know it, they work, and they start to get their feet under them, and maybe they start to develop some kind of vision. But here's some important questions. If you're going to start handling your money and your resources God's way, you got to answer a couple of questions. One is this: how do I become a person that God can trust with money? I don't want to become some crazy person the minute I get out of debt. Like, I didn't get out of debt so that I could get right back into it. I didn't get out of debt just so I can have a new, live on a new edge of living just beyond my means. I want to set a new normal in my life where I live for the purpose of being a blessing to the world around me. So how can I become that person that can handle the responsibility of lots of money? I heard a pastor talking one time. He read an article about, I think it was Bill Gates gave away, tens of billions of dollars, I can't remember, to all these nonprofits. And this pastor's reading this article, and he says, God, why didn't that go into the kingdom? Why couldn't Bill Gates give $10 billion to the church? And he felt like God says, because the church couldn't handle $10 billion. We wouldn't know what to do with $10 billion. And you say, God, why aren't you blessing my finances? Why aren't you giving me more? I feel like I don't have enough. I want to make an impact. And he's like, whatever God doesn't give to you, it's because it's good for you not to have it. So there's something in you that needs to change. I want to be the person that, God, you could trust me with the weight, the responsibility of kingdom resources. So the first question is, how do I become a person God can trust with my money? Second is, how do I train my kids, talking about legacy, to go farther than me? I don't want to just be a man who is a generous giver, and man, they give me a really good eulogy at my funeral about how I gave to orphans here and built a well here. And I want to create a legacy. The picture I had on my way to church today was I was driving down Isaacs towards downtown, and I'm imagining pulling over in my car, putting it in neutral, and pushing that thing down the hill. At first, very hard to get it going. But eventually, it's actually harder to stop it than it is to keep it going. That's what I want. I want to create a legacy where I hand the reins of the family over to my kids and say, okay, my time is over. You're the patriarch now. You're the leader here now. Take it over. The car's rolling. And now it would be harder for my kids not to walk in it than to walk in it. So how do I train them to take it farther than me? Because kingdom is my ceiling becomes their floor. So how do we do that? I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are two types of rich kids. Doesn't seem like there's middle ground. I know kids who are raised in families with wealth that are absolutely phenomenal people. Brilliant minds, hardworking, lots of initiative, going for it in life. And you go, wow, those are special people. And then we watch reality TV. And there doesn't seem to be anyone in the middle. There's not like an okay rich kid. You're either going to change the world for good and be the next president, or we hope you live to be 30. How do I raise my kids in a way that they're prepared for the weight of responsibility that comes with being blessed? Because none of us want our kids to be reality stars. I had a cousin who was on Real World on MTV. And and obviously my mom doesn't know what MTV is. And my cousin's mom, they knew what MTV was, but they didn't know what Real World was. And my cousin's mom probably didn't know what Real World was. So I remember the day my aunt called my mom and said her son was going to be on the Real World. And my mom gets off the phone and goes, "You won't believe it, your cousin's going to be on the Real World." And I said, "Uh-oh." And she goes, "What?" And I said, "We're not going to be able to watch that." Yeah. So, we need guidance from God and from wise counsel to maximize our impact for the kingdom. So I see there's a biblical pattern. A lot of this I took from the guy right now in the world that's just graced for this, Dave Ramsey. If you did Financial Peace with us, maybe some of this is in there. I don't know. But this is some Dave Ramsey material. But he talks about this pattern and a process that we move through financially, and it involves 4 steps. There's now, there's then, and there's us, and there's them. Now, then, us, them. So those steps take us from a place where we're focused on our immediate needs to a spot where we can give generously to meet needs around our neighborhood and around the world. So let's talk about now. Now is taking care of my household first. When you're in now mode, your head is down and you're grinding. You're focused on getting through each day. And unfortunately, this is a stage where most people just live. They live in now mode. I can't think about retirement. I'm thinking about paying the electric bill. We move from thank God it's Friday to oh shoot, it's Monday. And then it's too hard to enjoy life because we're focused on making a living and just paycheck to paycheck, no vision, just grinding. But once you embrace God's way of doing it, when you're living in the now mode, you might not have vision for the future, but you've got a vision of getting out of now mode. And it captures your heart, and all of a sudden you start making sacrifices. And I love what Dave Ramsey says. He says, you start selling everything you own. You start selling so much stuff that your kids are afraid they're next. Because I got to get out of now mode. And so you take up an extra job, and you're not going on vacation. And there's lots of good things you don't do. Can I say, if you're in now mode, there are great conferences, there are great God opportunities out there. Pray about it. If you ask me, what should you do? I would say it is godly for you to put your head down and get out of now mode. God will bless you, and you'll have years and years and years to do all of that. He'll catch up on that. But get out of this mode. Get free. Every day you're not sacrificing. That's more interest that you're paying. Bust it out. Get through it. So this is a stage. We put our head down. Our primary focus is taking care of our family. But that's okay. It's actually biblical. And by the way, if you're wondering, I would say tithing is a part of taking care of your family. Tithing isn't generosity, it's obedience. And tithing opens up God's blessing to the rest of it, because it's all his anyway. But he does promise in his word, you give the tithe, 10% goes to him, 90% gets blessed. And so that's just a part of that. And so we just say, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to take care of my family. It's the godly thing to do. This is New Testament verse. After grace, all of that. This is what Paul writes to young Timothy. He says this, anyone who does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, listen to this. He's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So anybody on TBN who says, don't pay your power bill, give it to me instead, that's not godly. That is not godly. We sow. Sometimes God calls us to sow in need. Sometimes. But as a principle, we sow out of abundance. Especially tithe and offering are two different things. Tithe, I don't question. I don't have the option. I don't pray about tithing. I'm supposed to do it. Bible says it. I do it. And we read that word first fruits in the scripture today. It's not tithe just because you give 10%. That's not what a tithe is. Tithe is the first 10%. I write the tithe check, and then I go to my bills. God first. Then you're tithing. Offering is when, and we will have to come to you and do this when it's time and say, okay, guys, it's time. We need X amount of dollars to buy this building. Pray, seek God, ask God what he might ask you to do. That's an offering. That's above and beyond. It's not an obedience thing, it's a generosity thing. I would say in now mode, you're working hard to get to generous mode. You're living principle. And we might have a missionary come and talk about the orphans in Africa and all of that, and you cry and yes, pray for them. I'm not saying, if the Holy Spirit tugs on your heart and you got counsel and they say, I think you should do it, do it. But pray for them, keep your head down, get out of debt. Get free. Because you can give a gift here, a gift there, a gift here, and not get out of now mode and spend the rest of your life in the chains of debt. Or you could say, okay, for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm sorry, I can't be as generous as I want to be, but I'm creating a legacy so that for the rest of my life and then into my children's life, we can be a generous family. Does that make sense? Okay. You need to care for those closest to you. Never let anyone try to guilt you into letting other priorities come before your family. Do not go into debt giving to the kingdom even. Don't do it. So in now mode, this is a stage where the biblical foundations for handling money really take root. I get out of debt. I'm staying on a budget. I'm living on less than I make. I'm saving as much money as I can, and I'm giving generously as circumstances allow. And when you follow these basic principles, you eventually start to find some margin. You will get out of debt. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not an oncoming train. You will get out. And you're going to eventually find some margin, and you're going to be able to breathe a little bit. And as you do, your head comes up, and you can start to look ahead to the future. I remember there was a singer on America's Got Talent. He's actually a worship leader, a guy I had listened to a long time before he was on the show. Amazing guy. And he and his wife had adopted a lot of abused kids out of the foster care system, and most of them had like special needs. I remember one of the children, when he got the child, there was gravel in his stomach. His mom was a meth addict. He was so hungry out in the driveway, he was eating the gravel. That's how hungry this kid was. And he said, in one of his interviews on the show, I'll never forget this, he said, "I'm here because I want my kids to dream." You see, when you're living in poverty, you can't afford to dream. You're thinking about, how am I going to get my next meal? Am I going to get abused tonight? Is somebody going to come into my room while I'm asleep and do horrific things? That's all you're thinking about. You're not thinking about someday I'm going to be a fireman. You're thinking about, what am I going to get in my belly this week? So here's what happens. You get out of debt. All that stuff, that cloud that's been hanging over you. And by the way, I believe you'll be able to hear God better. I believe you'll be able to not only have a vision for your money, you'll be able to have a vision for life. And man, God's word's going to open up to you. You're going to have vision in ministry. You're going to have things. God's going to call you. Things are going to open up because now there's not this cloud around you of chaos. And so we move from now to then, and we start to look forward to the future. This is where you start to look forward. As the weight of the now starts to lift, you recognize that there's more than what's going on right now. And you can start developing a vision for the future. Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there's no vision, the people perish." Without vision, we die. Proverbs 21:20 says this, "In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil." Wise people have more than they need. And so this is that time where we go, okay, there's no impending doom coming around the corner. Now let's start to think, what's our life going to look like when we retire? What's our life going to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now? So once your family is secure, you start to gain some confidence, and you can start planning for the future. You can start investing for retirement and saving for college funds for your kids, whatever those kind of future things that are going to increase the momentum of the legacy. It's so tempting when you get out of the weight of debt to reward yourself with more debt. I would say this, let your legacy be the filter. Man, we need a new car. How does that new car impact my legacy? Man, we need to go on a vacation. How does that vacation impact my legacy? Let your legacy be the filter. Because you're just going to get out. I saw this all the time. I was a social worker. I worked with people in poverty quite a bit. And what would happen is they'd get a check at the first of the month, and they'd blow it on something or some things, and then they would scrounge the rest of the month, like trying to figure out what they're going to eat, trying to figure out how they're going to stay warm at night, and then the next check comes the first of the next month, and they say, you know what? I worked so hard the last 3 weeks, not spending a dime, not doing anything I shouldn't do. I'm going to reward myself, and then they blow it all again. It's a cycle. And I'm saying we kind of do the same thing. It's just not a monthly thing. It's like a year, 5 year. Oh, we paid off our car. Hallelujah. Let's get a new one. Okay. So you start to get a vision for the future. Some people think they're living by faith when they're really flying by the seat of their pants. They're just living on the edge and claiming to trust God, but that's not faith. That's irresponsibility. Real faith involves creating a plan, thinking about it, and considering what can be done to pursue that vision. So let me just maybe whet your appetite. Some of you, especially some of you young people, listen to this. If you're 30 and you save 15% of your income, the average income in the U.S. is around $48,000. So 15% of $48,000 is $7,200. If you put away $7,200 a year, starting at age 30, and you put it into a decent growth stock, mutual fund, or a Roth IRA, and you leave it there, and from 30 to 70, you're putting away 15% of your income a month. From 30 to 70, by the age of 70, you will have $7.4 million. Do it! I'm 44 and I'm begging you, do it! Do it! Yeah. Disneyland now, $7 million when I'm 70. Come on, guys. Let's do this. Again, hopefully, I'm not talking about, being a high roller when you're 70. I'm talking about kingdom impact here. Okay, so we move from now to then, and then we shift to us. So I've taken care of the bills. I've gotten out of crisis mode. We're out of triage, financial triage. And now we're starting to look for, okay, what am I going to do? What are me and my wife going to do about retirement? What are we going to do when we get old? I don't want to be a burden to my kids. My retirement plan can't be my son becoming a doctor or an engineer or an NBA player or whatever. Like, I want to, again, I want my ceiling to be his floor. The rest of my life, I want to be the wind at his back, right? And so I'm taking care of the then, but now I'm shifting to us. And now it's beyond me and my wife and our retirement and all of that. And now I'm really thinking legacy. I'm thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about breaking generational patterns. I'm thinking about changing my family tree. Can you imagine the advantage your kid would have if they graduated high school, no college debt, and a down payment on their home or a home mortgage free? People talk about privilege like it's a bad thing. Privilege is a biblical thing. I want my kids to be privileged for the sake of legacy. I don't want them to be entitled. But debt isn't a good lesson for them. How awesome would it be, instead of trying to figure out how they're going to pay off their college debt, they're saying, how can I expand my business? How can I expand the kingdom? How can I, right? Everyone, their children should have battles, but I don't think they should have the same battles I have. Like, I fought to get out of debt. I don't want you fighting to get out of debt. I want you fighting to take ground, right? So you have a different fight from me, but you still have a fight, right? We're not going to shield them from the hardship. It's just they have a different hardship. It's on another level. Hopefully that makes sense. I want to change my family tree. So once you set in motion your vision for the then that's coming, then we will retire. In front of you, your peripheral vision allows you to see something better for your family. As your vision continues to expand, you begin to think about the kind of legacy you're building for the next generation. During then, you start to see what you can do to change your family tree. We can break free from bad habits and bad decisions that may have been crippling your family for years. I think it's interesting. you can look at certain cultures that have immense hardship in their history as a people group, as a family, immense hardship. And yet somehow, with everything stacked against them, they have figured a way to break out of that and be prosperous, generational wealth, create a new momentum. There is generational momentum. You see the opposite too in some cultures where it's just poverty is the lifestyle. In America, we have multi-generational families for multiple generations who've been on welfare their whole lives. And I'm not saying that like I'm this selfish taxpayer. Why are you spending my money? I'm saying God has more for you. God has a vision for you. God has life for you. So I want to break those patterns in my life. It's not critical to look back and say, you know what? God bless my parents and my grandparents. They did the best they could. I love them and I'm grateful for them. But I'm going to do things different. That's wise. That's not being critical. It's not being ungrateful. Break the pattern. We're going to have a budget in our household. We're going to talk about what are you doing after high school in our household. We're going to have plans. We're going to have vision. We're going to be prepared. We're going to break those cycles. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. I got to be honest, I got vision to leave an inheritance for my children. I don't know if I have that yet. I want it. I want a vision that says my children's children. Come on. And that's good. It's not wicked. It's not wicked to leave an inheritance. So did you know this? When your child is born at 0 years old, you put $166.67 a month away into a fund, an education fund. That's $2,000 a year at zero. By the time they turn 18, that $2,000 a year, you have put away $36,000. But through the power of compounding interest, that $36,000 that you've put away is $126,000 that your kid can use for education. And by the way, that fund that our government allows us to have that is set up in the tax code, it's a tax sheltered thing. It's very, very, very flexible on what kind of education they can do. If you're like one of those people that doesn't want your kids going to, the college and getting their mind warped or whatever, they can go to a trade school, they can go to a Bible college, it can pay for their housing, it can pay all the stuff around education to prepare them for their life. Can you imagine? There's almost no school in America that would be out of bounds for them with that kind of money. Legacy. But you know what? You know when it's too late to think about that? When they're 16 and you're going, oh, shoot. What's the plan? Vision. Let's have vision. And your vision is not grandpa dying and leaving you an inheritance. Come on. Oh, boy. We're building a legacy. To build a legacy that makes a positive difference in your family, you must be intentional about training your children to handle God's wealth. Because remember, the legacy isn't just, I've got all this money set aside for you so you'll have an easy life. If you don't put the character in them and the responsibility, the strength on their shoulders to carry them, the worst thing you could do is give them money. So I'm not just storing up money for them. I'm preparing them to handle it. Somewhere there's this idea that rich kids are like they never work and all of that. That has not been my experience with the kids I know that grew up in successful homes. Where I grew up, they were the hardest working kids. I can remember a family in our church, both parents were doctors, very, very successful. Their kids are very, very hardworking. Another kid in the church, his family was missionaries, and they moved away. He grew up at a different economic level. He moved in with them, and He was just wanted to like hang out, right? He wasn't in school. And they said, whoa, in this house, we don't just hang out. What are you doing? You getting a job? You going to school? What's your plan? You don't get to just hang out here. So like this idea, I don't see it in successful people that their kids just loaf around and mooch off like they're training and preparing their kids in their character and in their heart. They're saying, I'm storing up this wealth because I've got a legacy, and I'm going to hand it to you, and you're going to carry it on and multiply it for the kingdom. Train up the child in the ways he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. Legacy. You have to prepare them to pass on their own positive legacy to future generations, like a runner passing a baton in a relay. I've been really challenged with this. It's really hard for me, in my situation, to put away that $166.67 times 3. That's really, really hard for me. It'll be way easier for them. And then all of a sudden they're going, well, that's taken care of. What's the next thing? Maybe they're the ones that say, when they're born, I'm going to start putting the money away for a house. So when they get married, I'm giving them a house. Can you imagine your kids not having a mortgage? And then maybe their kids say something more. I'm going to start a business. And when my kids are old enough, I'm going to turn the business over to. You see what I'm saying? One generation has to decide that we're going to live on beans and rice for a while. And maybe I won't see it in my lifetime, but my kids are going to take this thing farther than me. Get legacy in your hearts. All right. Because you can't leave money to dysfunctional, immature kids because it'll ruin them. I'm not letting my inheritance get spent on heroin. I'm sorry. I'm going to put safeguards in place. While they're young, I'm putting responsibility in them. I'm going to train them how to handle money. I'm going to empower them to make decisions and learn to decide what the best thing to do. One of the most important things with money, we're going to go after this immediate gratification thing. And that is beyond money, but it affects money. So it's okay for your kid to be bored. They don't need a screen in front of their face 24/7. That does affect the way they handle money. All of this, I have to be entertained 24/7. All that, sorry, I'm like, get off my lawn. I'm getting old man here. All of that affects all of this. Like, no. Some parts of life are just work. And we do work. And we do. And it's not all fun. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's hard. In fact, for most of human history, the fun part was this big. So, how am I going to safeguard my family so that we can create a legacy? There's 3 lenses we have to understand. The first is the lens of magnification. The lens of magnification. It just means this, that money makes you more of what you already are. It magnifies the person you are. It always boggles my mind, these professional athletes, that they'll be involved in some horrible thing that happened in some nightclub in a horrible neighborhood in a city. It was the bye week. They weren't playing that week, so they went downtown to a club, and there was a shooting or whatever. I'm going, you make $25 million a year. Do you know what you could do with a weekend off? Private jet to Fiji. Yeah. And jet skis and like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm doing. And they're downtown on some slummy street shooting people. I'm like, money didn't lift you out of that. It just made you, now you can do stupid on steroids. It magnifies the person you are. If you're a jerk without money, you'll be a bigger jerk with money. If you're generous without money, you'll be incredibly generous with money. My uncle worked for the founder of CAT, like the big equipment CAT. And he was a believer, and he reverse tithed. He kept 10 and gave 90. Yeah, well, who wouldn't do that if you owned a multi-billion-dollar company? He always did it. I think it's easier to give 90% of a little bit of money than 90% of like $1 billion. You want to write that check? If you put yourself in a big hole when you're poor, more money just gives you a bigger shovel. You got to change the behavior and the thinking. We cannot say it's the system, it's this, it's my parents. No, there's something in your thinking that has to change. And no amount of money is going to fix that if you keep digging. If your marriage is good when you're poor, it'll be better with money because, man, you can do fun stuff. But if it's bad, it'll only get worse. Money is not the problem in your marriage. It magnifies the problem. Did you know that divorce for lottery winners is 4 times higher than the normal American? That's weird. You have to be careful about the person you become because that'll be magnified with money. So the first lens is the lens of magnification. Is we make money a god if we say, when I get money, this will get better. I have Jesus. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Money is not my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Sorry, guys, I'm going off here. I got to speed things up. The lens of ownership. The lens of ownership says this: God owns it all. I didn't know I was so passionate about this. Whew. The lens of ownership says God owns it all, and we are managers. Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Whatever you're in charge of, regardless of the amount, it belongs to him. And recognizing God's ownership allows you to keep your possessions in a proper perspective. It's much easier to handle someone else's money than your own, emotionally. When the flood kind of wiped us out, we had to move off that property, and we eventually sold that property. And when we sold that property, there were a couple churches in town that were buying new properties. And we were homeless as a church. We were down here trying to figure out how in the world we were going to do church and where we were going to be. And we had money in the bank. And I remember going to the bookkeeper at the time and saying, hey, I want you to write this check to this church, and I want you to write this check to this church. You know, the bookkeeper didn't hesitate because it wasn't their money. Okay, here's the check. They didn't say, oh, are you serious? We don't have a house. I said, okay, and gave it away. That should be us. When the Lord says, hey, I want you to give that. Are you serious? No, okay, it's your money. You own it all. It's much easier to handle someone else's money. This attitude lets you handle money wisely for God's glory without having it mess you up. Imagine this. Let's say I have $1,000 in my pocket. I pick you out and I say, here, I'm going to give you $1,000 right now, but it's 10 $100 bills. Here you go. Jose, 10 $100 bills. And right now I want you to find one person and give $100 away. And you're saying, okay, I get to keep $900? Yeah. Deal. Can we do it again? Right? But I wonder what would happen if I said, hey, Jose, hold on to this $1,000. And I didn't say anything. And then like a month later, I said, hey, Jose, could you give $100 away of that money? I wonder if it would be harder to give it away. Because over time, he said, you know what? I wonder if he forgot about that money. And he starts spending it in his mind, right? He's like, you know what I could do with $1,000? I'll bet you pretty soon he's going to tell me it's mine. And I could, right? And then I come and say, give $100 away, and he's like, because over time he started to believe that it was his. So immediate obedience. I say, nope, okay, that's God's. I'm giving it away. Okay, third lens of community. The lens of community. You become like the people you hang around. So be careful about who you spend your time with. Get intentional about who you hang out with. I would say this: hang up, don't hang out. Find someone who's living above you in this area. Someone you look at and you say, I like the way they think. I like the way they make decisions. I respect where they are in life with their money, with their life, and I want to get around them because I want to learn to think like them. You're not insulting a successful person by asking them to teach you things. That's a compliment. And most successful people are waiting for someone to say, would you teach me how to do what you do? You're not bothering them. I can tell you there are people in our church that are waiting for someone, a young person, to come along and say, would you help me get ahead? Would you teach me how to think about money? They're not going to say, you don't know how to think about money? What do you? No, they're going to say, absolutely. I've been waiting for somebody to ask me that question. Hang up. Okay. I'm going to fast forward. We can see the story of legacy, the picture of legacy with David and Solomon. David said to God in one of the Psalms, he said, I won't rest my eyes until I build you a house. The people wanted to build David a home, a big, beautiful home. And he said, why would I have a home when God doesn't have a home yet? And he made this vow of, I won't let my eyes go to sleep until, God, you have a house. But then a problem occurred. He came across a UFO, an unclad female object. And he committed murder to have that UFO. And because of the blood on his hands, God said, you can't build me a house. But he had this vision and he had this legacy. So what did he do? He stored it away. He stored it away. He stored it away. And not only did he store the money away, you realize the whole book of Proverbs is David's input into Solomon about wisdom. He's preparing him. We see it in Solomon, what he wrote. He's preparing his son. Because he was going to have to handle a whole lot of money. $21 billion is what he spent to build the temple. David had saved all of it. First of all, that's amazing. And then he was able to build a young man with the character to manage it all. So in building a legacy for your family, you have a choice to make. You can choose the scripture we read earlier, blessings or curses. And the difference between the two is the decisions you make today. Today is the day to establish a new direction for your family, for your children, for your grandchildren to follow in. Parents, can I say this? I want to create legacy, but I am not using money to control my children. We'll get into this in marriage and parenting. But I don't believe that when my children get married, I gained another daughter. I don't believe that. I believe a brand new family was formed. I'm not saying they're not your daughter-in-law. They are. But I think it's healthier for you as a parent to have the perspective of they're their own family. I'm not going to tell them how they should spend their money. I'm not going to tell them where they should work. I'm not telling them what they should do with their kids or where they should live or what the... No. They're their own family. They don't have to come to my house for Christmas. They're their own family. Let them go. It's kind of like chasing a butterfly. The better you do that, the more likely they are to come land on your arm. Don't use money to control your kids. There's a way to cast legacy without putting weight on them. Okay? Okay, so the last one is them. So we've taken care of the now, we've taken care of the then, we've taken care of us, our children, we're changing our family tree. Now it's the world. Now we have global vision. Now we're thinking, how can I impact the world for the kingdom? How can I change the world for God's glory? You know, God loves a cheerful giver. Margaret Thatcher said this: no one would remember the Good Samaritan if he only had good intentions. He had money as well. Read the story. Not only did he pay for the guy's, he bound up his wounds. He took him to the hotel. He paid for everything. He left all the money he has. Hey, take care of everything this guy needs. And if the bill is higher than that, I'm coming back through and I'll pay the rest. He was able to have that impact because he had money in his pocket. He had saved, and now he was making global impact. Dave Ramsey said this: I've noticed something: poor people don't feed poor people. You've got to build wealth if you're going to change the world. Let's let God use us to fulfill his plans with his resources. Did you know that $7,000 builds a well in Haiti? And a well in Haiti changes everything. It doesn't just change, obviously the obvious thing of, right? People drinking clean water means they're going to live longer, all of that. It affects that. It affects education. It affects voting. It affects women's rights. It affects all of it. $7,000. A whole village changed. We do this as a church. Our partners in India have told me, as fast as you can give us $10,000, we can plant a church. They're pumping out leaders faster than we could pump out $10,000. I remember sitting at the table with them at this conference this last year, so frustrated, going, you mean the only logjam here is money? Yeah. We're ready to go. And they're doing it. But man, if we had kingdom resources, if we were people with vision, if we were taking care of the now and the then and the us, and we started to say, okay, I've been responsible with what God's given me. Let's look to the world. As fast as we could get them money, we'd be planting churches. And that country would be turned upside down. Vision, legacy. So this cup and this glass and this pitcher, it's something that it's a Jewish tradition that is practiced every Saturday night on Sabbath. The Jews practice Sabbath on Saturdays, and they come with a pitcher and a glass on a saucer like this. And this is in the evening of Saturday because Sabbath is about to end. And they sing a song and they raise the pitcher. It's wine. I'm in now mode, so this is grape juice with a whole lot of water. And they sing a song and they pour the wine into the glass while they're singing, and they just keep pouring and they keep pouring while they're singing. And they wait till it overflows and it fills the saucer. And it's not some spiritual thing. It's literally about their resources. The cup represents their life, their household, their family. Lord, fill our cup, but don't just fill our cup. Fill it to overflowing so that it can flow out to those around us. And they're singing and thinking specifically, okay, tonight Sabbath is over. Tomorrow the week starts. This week, God, we want to walk in abundance, to be a blessing to those around us. Every week they do that. Legacy. Now then, us, them. In Genesis, God said, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. You're blessed to be a blessing.